Hi, I'm Father Jim Forson, and I'd like to share with you a few reflections on the gospel on this 30th Sunday in Ordinary Time. And when you were growing up, what was the most important rule in your house? I think to myself, what was the most important rule in my house? And I don't know if I have an answer to that. We had lots of rules. We had to, finish our homework before we could watch TV. We had to clean our plates, and oh, God help us if we didn't say grace before meals. And we had the rules of chores we had to do, and I had to, clean up after the dogs and all that kind of stuff. So there were lots of rules going on all the time. But the most important rule, I don't know what it was. Well, that's what Jesus was asked in the gospel today, governing the house of Israel. What is the greatest commandment, the most important rule? And Jews had more than 600 commandments by which they lived their life. And Jesus' response? He skipped past all of them. And he reached into the book of Deuteronomy and grabbed, love the Lord your God with all your heart. And he reached into the book of Leviticus and grabbed, love your neighbor as yourself. And he brought these two commands together to form the greatest commandment. Love God, love your neighbor. There now. That sounds good, doesn't it? Sounds nice, almost poetic. It's not. Jesus created the most difficult command of all by which to live your life. Think of it this way. Imagine going into the Middle East right now and proclaiming to Hamas, love God, love your neighbor. And who is your neighbor? Well, Jesus answered that question. What good does it do to love those who love you? Even pagans can do as much. What I say to you is you must love your enemy. To say to Hamas, those Jewish people that you despise, they're those enemies of yours, you must love them. Can you imagine trying to say that to them? Or trying to say to the Israelis who are constantly being harassed by all of these warring nations around them, they are the people you must love. They are your neighbors. Even if they are your enemies, you must love them. You've got to be kidding. Those kinds of words would be rejected out of hand as being naive or unrealistic, or even, who are you to say such things like that to us? And really, who would I be? I live here in Los Angeles, pretty safe and sound, and I don't have rockets flying over my house or having to run into bomb shelters and hide. I don't have terrorists coming across my borders trying to kill me. I don't know what that life would be like. Who am I to try to tell them, love God, love neighbor? And not even in the Middle East, just within our own families. I imagine all of us have experienced something that has gone on in a family that is just tearing at the fiber of the family, where someone has been cruel to another, or maybe a divorce has gone on, and now they've parted ways and formed sides, and who do you side with? And if you go to their house for Thanksgiving, well, then you're no friend of mine, and that kind of division. And to be able to say to a family member, you must love God, you must love your neighbor, you must love those people even if they've hurt you badly. Are you kidding me? Shut up. I don't have to love them. Who do you think you are, and who are you to say these things? Well, who's anybody? Who can proclaim such a message with any measure of authority? Well, there's one who can. That's Jesus Christ. And not just because of his divinity. He can talk with authority because of his humanity. The world that Jesus was born into shares much in common with the world in which we live. Because when Jesus was born, the emperor of Palestine was a homicidal maniac, King Herod, who murdered everyone, even murdered his own children because he feared they were after his throne. And then all around this era were people, religious insurrectionists who were trying to throw off the Roman Empire because they couldn't stand them. And Rome was constantly sending out its soldiers to round them up and kill them and try to pacify the people. And finally, they had to cut a deal with the Sadducees, telling the Sadducees that We'll let you be in power in Jerusalem, but you calm these people down. And the Pharisees warring with the Sadducees because they resented their power. And that was what was going on all around Jesus. He was not blind to it. He was in the middle of it. And all of these religious fanatics, well, we know of one of them, Barabbas. People would look at Jesus as maybe being one of those too, especially when just before this message that he proclaimed, remember, he had his triumphal entry into Jerusalem and all of the people shouting out, Hosanna to the Son of David. This might be the guy who's going to free us from the Romans. Naturally, they were excited about it, and that worried the Sadducees and the Pharisees terribly. And they said to Jesus, tell these people to be quiet. And Jesus' response is, if I tell them to be quiet, even the stones will sing out. You bet Jesus made them nervous, because soon after that, he went into the temple and tipped over the money changers' carts and drove out all the animals, the kind of thing a insurrectionist would do. Yeah, they had their eye on Jesus, all right. And they did not like him at all. And they were after him to try to trap him in words so they could throw him in prison and have him crucified. Jesus was not blind at all to the violence and the threats of the world in which he lived. He saw them all very clearly. And yet, when asked, what is the most important law of all? That is to say, what is the path that we walk on that best guides us through life? What did he do? He chose the most difficult one. Love God, love neighbor. That's the path. And that's such a difficult path to walk on. I mean, how do you love a neighbor who hates you? How do you love a neighbor that you just don't like? How do you do that? I don't know. But I know where to begin. You begin just as Jesus taught us, loving God. And not love in some intellectual assent of the mind, no. But love that comes from us, me, responding to the way that I have received God's love. And so I begin by asking myself, where do I receive God's love? Where have I experienced it? And I look at my life, and I'm grateful to be alive. And my health, and I give thanks for my health. And I mean, I have my struggles. I have problems with my knee right now, and I go in for physical therapy. But then I see others who are, oh my God, they're so badly crippled. And I think, I got nothing to complain about. I'm blessed. And I see that as a blessing from God, and I give thanks for it. And the house I live in, and the food I have, and the people who care for me and who love me. I'm blessed. And all of those blessings, they can disappear tomorrow. But I have them all with me right now, and I see all of them as a manifestation of God's love for me, and I'm grateful and I'm thankful. And to all of this love I've received, I have to say back to God, thank you. I love you for all the love you've given me. Don't we all find ourselves doing that? Responding in love to God who loves us? That's where we begin. And if I begin there, well, then maybe I can walk on that path to be able to begin to love that which God loves. And God loves my neighbor even if I don't. God loves my enemy even if I have difficulty with them. If I begin with loving God, be able to walk on that path to continue by loving what he loves. And that's the path to walk on. And that's the path that Jesus recommended. That's the greatest commandment of all. It's the most difficult, it's the hardest, it's the most challenging, but it is the one that will transform this world and transform my life. And so today, I begin. Love God, and then love what God loves.